the diffusion of innovation curve, we see an absolute one-to-one correlation between what's going on. So when you're thinking about launching a product into a marketplace, what you're really doing, and you should better think about it, is you're launching a product into the human mind. The certainty thinkers, the past thinkers, are always going to wait until last. They're always going to be the skeptics, the naggards. They're always going to make sure that there's enough data, enough proof, enough validity before they actually go out and buy it. These late majority want to see that it has been properly adopted in the marketplace. They actually want to see that it has infused itself, that the relationships between the product you've got and the things in the world have now been actually connected. Because they're all about looking at how things are connected in the world. When you hunt over this side, you luckily have a lot of that future thinking. So you have momentum on your side from the point of view of novelty. You have the momentum on the point of view side of people who are the early adopters, love new things, they love to play with things, they're always change-oriented. So the question is that how do you use this? Well, it's very straightforward. If you actually start to gather data and information about how it works very early on and use that in your advertising, the effect is of actually pulling your product into the market by engaging with the thinking that you're trying to engage with. Now, of course, there's a little bit more to it than just that, but that is the essence of it. So what mindtime's doing is it's opening up our thinking, it's opening up our ability to understand what's really going on in product adoption, or diffusion of innovation, or engagement with healthcare in terms of people wellness in the workplace, and how you actually increase the number of people in the wellness programs, therefore decreasing the overall healthcare costs, and therefore the burden of healthcare on the product as it goes to market. Okay. So the last thing I just wanted to mention to you, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions, is that innovation is a very interesting word that most of us assume means ideas. It means new. And what we try to do then is we try to move those ideas to execution, to take them to market, to patent them as fast as we possibly can. And in so doing, we actually don't go over here to this certainty thinking. We don't actually include it for two reasons. One, it's slow. It is literally slow. It tends to slow the process down, and it's investigative, it's always asking why and what would happen, and et cetera, et cetera. And secondly, it tends to actually point out the flaws in our thinking rather too early on when we're not prepared to hear them. And so we tend to exclude them from the conversation. And by the way, extrovert, introvert, we've done the science. These are also introverts who do not speak up at the meeting, and because they don't speak up at the meeting, we never actually hear them until you're about to pull the trigger on the deal. And they go, hang on a second, just before you do that. I don't think it's going to work. And you go like, what? You know, I always thought it would work. And you say, hang on a second, we're about to do the deal. Why couldn't you have told us that last year? Well, I didn't have enough information. What do you mean you didn't have enough information? Well, anything that could have happened. You could have changed your mind. I mean, why go and do the research until I know you're going to do it? And so these are the kind of people who you want to strengthen or rather lengthen their neck. It's this action that happens quite often in meetings. The fact of the matter is that the problem was not theirs, the fault was not theirs, the fault was ours. We actually led this whole thing in the wrong direction. Because once you've actually built the bridge or the jetliner and it's fallen out of the sky, and you call the ENTS or the TS, what do they call it?
TSA.
TSA. No, they're the ones who stop you getting on the airplane. The ENTSB, whatever it's called. Anyway, it's the engineers, thank you. You call the engineers or the bridge builders and you ask them to figure out what went wrong. And they'll tell you what went wrong, and what you do then, you put that data into the idea and you redesign and off you go again. This is failed thinking. This thinking is called anti-clockwise. And it really is anti-clockwise. It's really dumb. Because the real way to do this is to actually think about it from the point of view of innovation. Innovation is not about ideas. It's not about ideas. It is about ideas that become validated and then become executed, and to do that in little increments very, very rapidly. Iterative process, rapid, lean, there's lots of words that describe this, agile. But the idea is to move it around like this because it becomes not only clockwise, but you actually include all of the different thought processes early on in very little increments. So you never get the big hold-up, you never get the failure, you never get the don't include those people, they're the stick in the muds. Does this make a little bit of sense?
No.
Yeah? No, not to you. You are a future thinker. You would never ask those people a question, would you?
Yeah. I will ask a question later.
Great. Okay. So one of the reasons why we actually don't ask those people the question is very straightforward. Anyone who's been on the London Underground has heard the mighty words, mind the gap. Please mind the gap. Every single time the door's open, please mind the gap. They're about to close, please mind the gap. I say the same thing, please mind the gap. And the reason is this. As you will probably have at least subliminally figured out by now, in this map there are 3 different sets of patterns. There are these patterns here, which are future thought patterns, which are shallow and fast and cover a large territory. Big picture, not a lot of depth. There are these thought patterns which are very, very deep, but not a lot of them. Very narrow focused, very deep focused. And there are these thought patterns which are actually a harmonic between the two. When you take this and you affect it with this, it integrates into that. The challenge is, this doesn't like that. Doesn't get on with that. Doesn't see the world the same way. Doesn't connect, doesn't have the same language, doesn't have the same values, doesn't even believe in the same things. This believes that anything's possible. This believes that nothing's possible until you've actually proven it. So when you have an idea from here, starting to be looked at by the people from over there, it's painful. It's painful because it feels like they've just put you in the wood chipper. They're going to take the idea and they're going to rip it to pieces and they're going to shred it. And it sounds as though they're attacking your very genius. It sounds as though they're attacking the very thing that you are made of, the thing that you see in yourself, and it's your self-esteem, which is the ability to have an idea. By the way, most future thinkers do not need to have their ideas built. They just need to have someone come along and go, great idea. That's the truth. When that process happens to an idea, if your ego is involved, it becomes it's like a murder scene. Likewise, when these people watch these people try to take an idea that's not been validated to market, they go absolutely nuts. They want nothing to do with it. So I want to end the talk by saying that the true nature of innovation is actually communication, human communication, and the proper use of these 3 kinds of humans. And by the way, all in here there are humans that we know. But to actually use the 3 kinds of human thought patterns in such a way that you can move information around your organization and you can solve this problem, which is what we do in human communication, to create an understanding of the very common and compounding nature of human thought. Because these people do not have the answer any more on their own than these or those do. Together, collectively, we have the pieces of the puzzle to create good innovation. Individually, none of us do. All right, I'm going to stop there and just open up some questions.
Any questions? Yes, sir. Michelle.
Yeah. Since I vocalized my doubts here, let me take one example. The person or the group who made this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Everybody's seen this? People say Steve Jobs did it. Maybe he was the core guy. And he very pointedly did not want these ideas being validated. And now I'll make a little bit of a joke out of it. Although it's a serious question, it's a very serious question. He did not want any focus groups or anything, since he knew that they would not get it. Now the joke is, with your little exercise in the beginning, you made it clear that the Germans are certainty people. So we imagine that Steve Jobs would have given the idea of the iPhone and have the Germans validate it. It would have never become a reality. Mm-hmm. So that's a serious question.
Well, I would say that there was a lot of certainty in the iPhone.
Pardon?
I would say there was a lot of certainty in it. So, who owned a Newton? I used to own a Newton. You owned a Newton? Good on you. We're old. You see, shit. No, look, I mean, Newton's, anyone under the age of 35 has not actually heard of the word Newton other than the Apple guy. The fact of the matter is this, is that I agree with you. There is a lot that Steve Jobs says, you know, I didn't want to do this with the focus groups. I wouldn't confuse certainty with focus groups. Okay? What I would say is that There is nothing in here that had not actually been proven to be useful to human beings by the time this was designed. What Steve Jobs did, and this is his genius, is to understand how to amalgamate things that were already well proven and adopted and how to make them into one thing that had a better interface. And the interface for this didn't start with this. The Newton used to be about this big.
I don't remember.
You remember the Newton? Okay. That's what proved this. Everything that came after Newton proved this. So I agree with you in one sense. There are times when going to certainty, going to make absolutely sure, totally wrong thing to do. But I think you would agree that there was a lot of certainty built in. And what he was saying is, I know enough. I've been around long enough. I've had enough experience that I'm going to back my own horse. There's enough certainty here. Consumers in a focus group probably won't get it. And he may or may not have been right. We don't know. He didn't do it. Question on that?
Well, the big problem with focus groups is that you can prove what had been invented 5 years ago, that you're right. That's a focus group is really good.
Yeah.
So if you want to make sure whether we want to get something out of the system.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about focus groups producing certainty. I think focus groups actually allow you to know, it may be, how something will actually be received in a certain market.
No, it's not on the Newton. It's the compact, it's the Palm, the BlackBerry, whatever they had. Yeah, all basically the iPhones. Okay, everybody's mucking around. Let's do it properly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the Android. Yeah? They're much better. They still can't interact better because they just don't sit down. This is the time when you say, okay, now we have to get the work done properly.
Yeah. You can't create creative genius. Creative genius does not come out of collective thought. It comes out of individual thought, and that's just the way that it is. But I would put it to you that if you were building an airplane, an Airbus, or you're building a ship, or you're building a bridge, to not include, to not have validation, or you're changing your strategic direction as a company, to not include the past thinkers, is a huge mistake, a huge mistake. And I mean, I've got 20 years of consulting with some pretty large names around the world, and I will tell you that the big issue in the world today is not actually that this is not used. The big issue in the world today is the fact that, and we've got some great research we've done on this the last 2 years, is that the higher you go up in an organization, the more future thinking there is. The lower you go down into an organization, the more present and past thinking there is. You want to know what the problem with change management is? Is that management actually is not aware of how to change the system that they are sitting on top of. That's the problem with change management. Not that it cannot be changed. What they have is lots of visions and lots of ideas because they have both the time and the exposure, and they are hired to do that. But when it actually comes down to it, they don't actually know how to translate the vision and the idea, the opportunity, into something that will move 300,000 people in the case of Federal Express. You know, one of the most innovative companies in the world, when it was starting, is one of the least innovative companies I've actually seen. And the reason is not because they won't, is that because with 300,000 people at the very top, and only at the very top, do you find future thinking. Everybody else is a part of actually holding together execution and a process. And you have to know how to talk to those people, you have to know what they're about, how they perceive the world, and how they regard change, and what can and cannot happen within that framework of change in order to bring about innovation. Any other questions? I cannot believe it. 44 minutes and 49 seconds. I have 10 seconds left.
10 seconds left.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.